If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. Hey everybody, welcome to the Phillies Talk Podcast presented by Team Toyota. Here we are on March 10th, and we had another false alarm. Thought there might be a deal between the league and the Players Association to end the lockout on, Wednesday of this week. But again, the sides were unable to come to an agreement. Some more 11th hour clutter in the form of this international draft, Jim, that we're going to talk about in a second. But I guess the biggest item to talk about first is two more series were lopped off the schedule. Now we're looking at April 14th at the earliest for the season to begin.
We think. MLB, they kind of play with words a little bit here. A week ago, Rob Manfred canceled two series, but then they're back on the table as a negotiating chip, possibly restoring those two series. Yesterday, two more series are lopped off, but if they strike a quick agreement today, maybe they're back on. So, the word canceled it's sort of a loose word for me. But the clock is ticking here where we are getting pretty close, if not right there, to a point where it's not going to be a full season, and then the players are going to have a whole other fight here because they're not going to get paid for a full season. So they're going to end up fighting that because they want to get paid for a full season. I have a tough time thinking they would accept any deal where they didn't get full service time because this is a lockout. But we'll see. But yeah, you mentioned false alarm yesterday. I feel like a lot of progress has been made when I look at the numbers on minimum salary, on the establishment of that 0 to 3 bonus pool, and then tightening the gap there. And then especially on the luxury tax. I mean, the owners are at $230 million now. That's a $20 million jump from where they played at in 2021. And they're only like $2 million apart in the first year. They're closer to $10 million apart, I think, in the last year, maybe $8 million apart. But I don't know. They've made dramatic strides there. And yesterday this pops up that the international draft is the new sticking point. I just see that as a matter that can be, rectified and agreed upon. I know there are, people fighting against it, but they've been talking about an international draft for a long time. And to me, it's almost like the DH thing. It's been a long time coming. I just feel like, boy, if that's going to, kill this potential agreement, if that's going to cause a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks more to be lopped off the schedule, I have a hard time, believing that can happen. I just feel like there's enough common ground here that they can push this thing forward and get something done here. That's just kind of the way I feel. And then, yesterday, Wednesday, the 9th, talks break down. MLB lops off two more series. They're dueling, press releases or statements from the owners and the union. And then 2 hours later, you hear, oh, by the way, we're still talking tonight. So that kind of indicates to me that they feel like they made some ground and they can solve this international thing. I mean, it sounded like the players were interested in continuing to talk about the international draft, as long as they could get rid of draft pick compensation on the free agents on the big league level. So there's a lot there, and like I said, I feel like they've been talking about international draft for a long time. I feel like it's something that the time has come for it, but we'll see.
Well, so the league was reportedly tying the elimination of the qualifying offer draft pick compensation for players free agents that so right now the current system is if you're extended a qualifying offer and you're a free agent, you sign with another team. The team that signs you is stripped of a high pick. The team that loses you is compensated with a pick. Reportedly, the league was trying to tie this international draft. Like, you give us the international draft, we'll give you the elimination of that compensation with the qualifying offer. It's interesting to me that really had not been reported, that detail, until it seems like the last 48 hours. Do you think that was like a last-minute push for the owners to try to get this through at the final hour, or do you think this was a big deal to them all along, as you've been saying?
I don't know. I mean, they've been trying to get the international draft for some time, and I think the players have been stiff-arming it for some time. But early in these negotiations, it seems like a month ago when, we heard that DH was going to happen, things like that. Didn't we hear that draft pick compensation was going to go away?
Yeah.
And now it's tied to the international draft. So it just, I think, shows that you don't always know what's going on in those negotiating rooms. You know what each side wants you to hear. So maybe it's been alive, all the time. The question is the one of the interesting elements here is the Major League Baseball Players Association is showing resistance to an international draft. The international draft, deals with players who are not even in the union yet and might never be in the union. So why is the union adamant about this matter when those aren't even their constituents yet? It's an interesting, topic to kind of delve into. I think the answer is eventually some of those guys are going to be in your union, especially the guys that might get huge bonuses because they're the cream of the crop talent-wise. Also, these prospects are represented by agents, and money ends up in their pockets. So I think, the agents, are not for it, and for that reason, the players are not for it. But management wants it because it would put a control on spending in places like Latin America, bring some structure to it. And I think that's been needed for a while. We've seen problems down there. But you have a number of former major leaguers who were represented by the union, who run academies down there. They profit from helping develop those players. So there's going to be resistance against it. And I don't think MLB wanted to put it right in there in 2022 or 2023. They want to work toward it in 2024 because it is going to take some time to get an international draft done. But, I can see where the prospects and their advisors who may have ties to the union wouldn't want it. It limits a young player's choice of where to sign. And it probably makes his potential earnings are not subject to the market as much. They're more subject to a slot. You are this pick in the draft, you will make that much. Instead of, if I'm the best player in the draft, I can shop these 3 or 4 teams against each other and jack my bonus up. So we'll see.
To that point, David Ortiz said that I saw David Ortiz said yesterday that from like the perspective of a kid in the Dominican Republic, baseball is one of your only ways out. It's not like, a country like America where you can play football or baseball or hockey or basketball, that for kids in the Dominican, you don't want to limit the dream for them. You don't want to.
How are you limiting the dream? How are you limiting the dream? Seriously, if I think one of the real truisms of baseball is if and really of any sport, if you play good and you produce, they're going to find a place for you. So if you're a young Latin player, every team, if there's a draft or there's not a draft, scouts are going to put their eyes on you. And if you're talented enough and good enough, I think you're going to have entree into the game and a chance to, make it. You just might be beholden to one team for a while because there's a draft. I don't know that it limits the opportunity for a young prospect. It might limit the chance to make a big financial score for the very, very cream of the crop guys who shop themselves against two different teams and drive up the price.
Okay, we're back. Sorry, we had to take a little break there for a sec.
Yeah, I apologize, Corey. My dog broke wind, and it was a little offensive.
That's what that noise was?
The noise was one thing. The smell was another.
All right. Well, moving on, Jim, to the luxury tax, because we kind of referenced it earlier and how MLB has upped its offer and the sides are closer together now. It doesn't seem like that would be going backwards at this point. And the latest proposal from MLB had the competitive balance tax at $230 million for 2022, which is $20 million more than it was last season when it was $210 million, and the Phillies were right up against it. So, either way, whether it settles at that 230 or there's more wiggle room between that 230 and what the players are seeking, that's a lot more money for the Phillies to spend this offseason and in the near future. And some of the conversations we had earlier this winter were like, can they do enough? Can they sign enough free agents? Can they make enough of a dent in the bullpen plus the outfield to be competitive and to contend with the Braves? There's $20 million more there to spend. I mean, that's another very good player you can add in.
Yeah, that's a significant jump. I mean, that just illustrates, we were talking how they've come closer. They've made so many strides on a real big core issue, maybe the number one core issue, the CB competitive balance tax. I don't know that the Phillies will spend that extra money. I mean, that's something ownership will still have to approve. But I'll say this, they have a history of spending pretty much right up to the tax. They were like $1 million short this past season. So if that's any indication, you kind of expect them to continue to spend up to the tax. And, ownership has said they would go over the tax threshold for the right opportunity to win a championship. But they're one of the teams that spends to the tax, and there are a number of other teams that spend right to the tax. I mean, that's one of the things the players look at when they say this is a de facto salary cap, all the teams that go to the tax and sort of stop. So the Phillies have been one of those teams over the years, back in there when they were really good and then recently. So if they continue to operate that way, you'd think, yeah, they could make a couple decent free agent scores this winter if ownership will approve that spending. They were involved with Schwarber quite heavily before the lockout. Conforto. I'm sure they'll take the temperature on Chris Bryant. I don't know that he's a priority item, but hey, we'll see where his market is when this thing opens back up. But I think your point is good. They could afford some guys, and they need some guys. They need outfield, left field, center field, leadoff, thumper, bullpen. You'd love to see them get some more bullpen help. So I think for Phillies fans, the raising of the threshold is a good thing because it's going to provide, I think, more realistic opportunity to improve the team because there's been that reluctance to go over the tax. Well, now the tax is higher, so we'll see.
Just doing the math, I wrote a piece recently that the Phillies payroll from a CBT standpoint is at around $178 million. So, just doing the math, you add two more $5 million relievers to the bullpen, and then say there's the Schwarber / Conforto, say he makes $18 million a year, right? So that's an additional $28 million from the 178. So now you're at about 205, 208. There's still a lot of wiggle room beneath that $230 million figure. So there are other ways. And it also, I wonder if it puts the Phillies in play for a guy like Nick Castellanos, who among those corner outfielders that are still available, I would think that Castellanos' total price tag is going to be, if not significantly larger than Kyle Schwarber's, larger at least.
Yeah, you would think, but I don't know. It's going to be a really crazy, shortened, compacted free agent season. So I don't know if somebody's going to jump at a short-term deal, maybe with a high price tag. Maybe they could be in one of those players, and maybe that is a guy like Castellanos. So the other thing, I think you don't have to spend it all right now. It's sometimes nice to have that little ball of cash stuffed away in your sock drawer for the trade deadline. Suppose you got a chance to really upgrade a closer or something. and it's going to cost you some money. So it's nice to have that little bit of extra wiggle room at the trade deadline as well.
Jim, as we get deeper into this thing, and the weather gets warmer, in the Northeast, when spring training inevitably begins, do you think that MLB could opt to do what it did a couple of years ago, where teams just had their summer camps in their home cities, or could it be a hybrid? How do you think the league's approaching that?
I think it's possible. When they did it 2 years ago, the weather was really warm. Camps didn't open until June, so basically summer was here. There were also stiff COVID protocols, so it really benefited you to be at one smaller venue, basically your home ballparks. They do need a month of spring training, and that 2 years ago they went with about 3 weeks. So they want a month now. You do need teams to play against. That might, have them leaning toward going to Florida and Arizona. But with the lost revenues, there's going to be lost revenues. I mean, there's been lost revenues the last 2020 because of the pandemic. Last year, the gates weren't open everywhere the whole season. There were lost revenues, and then there's going to be some this year because, spring training and schedule could be affected. Maybe as a cost-cutting measure, they have them in their home ballparks, like they did 2 years ago. I think it'll be dictated by the weather when this thing gets settled. I mean, if it gets settled today or tomorrow, this week, I see them going to Florida and redoing the spring training schedule and playing spring training schedule down there. If they were to come up here, meaning, not just the Phillies, all teams, there is that problem about, who do you play? Because you are going to train for a month. The Phillies could do some day trips to the New Yorks and Washington and Baltimore and make that work. But, you get teams like Colorado and Seattle who are, and then even maybe like Kansas City, who are kind of geographically isolated. The Texas teams, I mean, they have each other, but that's about it. So those teams are sort of geographically isolated. They don't have the ability to do or maybe as easily do the day trips that teams maybe in the Northeast and maybe the Midwest could do. So I think that would factor into their thinking. If we get something here in the short term, and they're going to look to get to as close to 162 as possible, I would believe they would go to their spring training sites.
Jim, a couple other little pieces of the next potential CBA that we have not yet talked about. Banning of the shift, or at least reducing the shift. There's this talk about bigger bases, which could theoretically reduce injury risk of a guy, landing awkwardly on a base. It happened to Bryce Harper several years ago, pre-Phillies. Also could potentially increase stolen bases by making it, easier for a guy to slide into second, potentially.
How would a bigger base have prevented that Bryce Harper injury?
I don't know. This is the rationale behind it, I guess.
Yeah, that was because he lunged at the bag.
Right.
And
maybe they make him softer and more pillowy.
Oddly hyperextended. I guess they could make them a little softer. Boy, the bigger bases is a real head scratcher to me. The famous old sports writer Red Smith used to say that 90 feet was as close to perfection as there is on the face of the earth, and it's right when you look. He's right when you look at all the bang bang plays. I mean, suppose they set those bases at 88 feet or 91 feet. Look at all the plays that wouldn't be close, right? 90 feet, perfect. So now we're going to make the distance between the bases, I guess, if you make them bigger, the distance is a little shorter, right? By a couple inches, by an inch or two. So that's going to make more guys steal bases. I think if you valued the stolen base as an industry, more guys would try to steal bases, develop more base stealers.
Yeah, but the math on a stolen base might change a little bit if the base is 0.08 centimeters closer or whatever that is.
Yeah, but so does that do we have to do an asterisk when somebody breaks the season stolen base record?
Well, I don't think there's any danger of that happening in the next 150 years.
Okay, but it's interesting to talk about. I think the bases are fine the way they are. I think some of this is that the injury risk. I really don't buy it. I mean, I think a lot of it is these guys overslide the base, and then the guy, the fielder keeps the tag on him, and then the umpire goes out. Or they replay it, and they're looking for that guy come off and injured his foot. I mean, it's become a real cheesy play, and it's almost like
that right there,
three times a week. What?
I was going to say that right there is a way to increase stolen bases. If you remove that part of the rule, and if a guy overslides second base and comes off for a fragment of a second as the tag is still being applied, you remove that. Maybe teams have more incentive to steal a base.
How about this? Bring back the fundamental slide. Slide feet first. Impact on the shin. Impact on the right cheek. Hands in the air so you don't get spiked. Slide hard into the base. Slide hard into the base with your legs, the strongest part of your body. Put it in the back of the fielder's mind that I'm coming in aggressive. You got the nuts to hang in there and put it on me. I'm coming at you. Bring that back. I'm not a fan of the head first slide. I'd like to see it go away. I understand it has to stay for occasionally when you're trying to avoid a tag. Obviously, it's part of the game with diving back to first base. But the risk reward to me doesn't make any sense. You don't get to the base any faster. And, some of the most delicate part of your body, your fingers and your hands, all those small bones are exposed to injury. Diving into home plate is dumb. You have a catcher who's got $200 worth or $400 worth of Gladiators equipment on, and you're going to dive in with your hands to his shins? That doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you're not getting there any faster. It just slide hard and fundamentally correct into the bag, anchor on the bag, pop up and stand up for the whole ballpark to see that you were safe. And I think we'd solve a lot of issues. And that was really good. It really worked for a long time. And now we're going to get bigger bases so guys can keep diving and overslide and then hang on. And this, we're going to believe that's actually going to prevent injury, a bigger base. I frankly, I don't buy it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the data will prove out, but I don't buy it. Leave the bases the way they are. We don't need to lower the bar and make it 89 feet and 10 inches so a guy can steal a base. Develop a good base stealer and put value in base stealing, and that art form will come back. And leave the base, stop lowering the bar. That's my rant for the day.
All right, so you heard it here, folks. Jim Salisbury is a huge fan of the bigger base, and if you agree with him, you should tweet him.
Hang on a minute. Hold on a minute. I got an idea. Hold on.
Is he bringing the dog back?
Here. You can use this as a base.
For all of our listeners, Jim just
it's about twice as big. It's soft. You could dive in. You won't break your fingers.
There you go.
But you might break your fingers on the fielder's shin or his spikes. That's all I got to say.
There's still that. Okay, so lastly, then the shift. As I look at the Phillies, I don't know if they're a team that would be significantly impacted by a decrease or elimination of the shift. Looking at the data, the Phillies defensively, they shifted less last season than any team in all of Major League Baseball, just above 17% of the time. And they also don't, have many players who are necessarily pull happy. Like Bryce Harper saw a shift in 2/3 of his plate appearances last season, but he's a guy who utilizes different parts of the field. I would say Didi Gregorius sticks out as the most pull happy Philly. I think that there's a stat, maybe he had his first non-pull home run of his career last season. And on the ground, he skews toward the 4-3 or the ground ball to first base as opposed to hitting it to the shortstop. What do you think of, are you pro shift? Are you anti-shift? Where do you stand on all that?
My take on the shift is I don't like it. I absolutely detest when I see a left-handed hitter hit one on the screws and the second baseman is 40 feet, 50 feet, 60 feet out in right field and throws him out on a 200-foot one Harper to shallow right field. So I don't like it. That said, I'm not sure I like, the game legislating where you can play your players. I feel like you got 9 guys, or excluding the pitcher, I guess you get 8 fielders, and excluding the catcher, you get 7 guys. You can play those guys anywhere you want. You can play them out in the parking lot, and if you want, and you're gonna pay the price for it. So part of me is like, you shouldn't tell teams where to play their guys, and if they want to play them in out of position, that's their problem. But also, I recognize that the lack of action and the lack of declining offense and is a problem. And maybe we do need to have some parameters about where these guys can play, just for the good of the game. So I would be open-minded and open to them controlling what you can do on the shift, if that were to come to pass. I mean, the shift, everybody thinks it's new. I mean, Lou Boudreau used to shift Ted Williams in the 40s. But I don't think anybody ever saw it getting to the point where it is now, where sometimes you look down from the press box and you want to take a picture, you'll see all these guys on the right side of the field and nobody's on the left side of the field. And it makes for some odd baseball, and I think ultimately baseball would be better with some controls placed on the shift. So I think that's coming, and like I said, I'd be okay with it. I mean, there's part of me that you should be able to play guys where you want to play. If you want to do dumb things, do dumb things. But I do think we need to make the game better, and that might be a way to make it better. What do you think of it?
Well, no shift, and
what do you think?
No shift. Ryan Howard's probably a .286 career hitter. Might be a Hall of Famer.
It impacted his career in a big way, and everybody says, hit the other way, beat the shift. When you shift a guy, to me, you need to pitch to the shift, right? So use Ryan Howard as an example, left-handed hitter. That whole left side of the field is open. Just flick it that way. Well, when you want to pitch him in, so he pulls it into the shift where all your defense is in, and it's tough to bring your hands in and hit it that way. It might be easy to do in the backyard in a wiffle ball. We used to stand in front of the garage and throw a taped up tennis ball and try to hit the square. Might be easy to do there, but when a guy is throwing 96 with boring action in on the hands, different game.
Yeah, I think life was a little different before the two.
I want to hear your opinion on this. Give me your opinion on the shift, because we have an age difference. People make fun of me for being an old head, and you're a young, handsome guy. I want to hear your feel on it.
Well, thank you for saying that, Jim. But I would say that I am in favor of the additional offense it would create. However, my overruling opinion would be that it's a strategic element, and I'm all for additional strategy and thinking about the game in different ways and trying to find market inefficiencies. When you think about a little parallel in the NBA, James Harden, right? So he became this incredible offensive player, and all throughout that process, people scoffed at it because they said he was kind of bending the rules or doing things that were not in the spirit of the game, with the way that he would draw fouls and make players commit in certain ways. I liked that element. I liked that he added a layer of strategy to it. He found something that worked that other players or other teams weren't doing. And, when the shift first exploded, that was kind of a market inefficiency. You had the more analytical teams that were gearing their defenses toward it more so than the old school team. So I would say at the end of the day, I don't like anything that removes strategy, though if there is going to be something that removes a little bit of strategy, this is something that is an okay compromise, because unquestionably it would add more offense and more excitement to the game, would probably result in games being even longer than they currently are, however.
Mm-hmm. That's a great explanation. It's not altogether different than how I feel about it. You should be able to play your guys where you want to play them. And if you have data that shows that's a smart move, you should be able to do it. But I just feel like it's dragged the game down a little bit, and it might be a way to bring things back a little bit by putting a bit of a governor on it, limiting it. Maybe you don't want to take it away totally. Maybe you can use it. Is there a way to use it 5 at-bats a game, 4 at-bats a game? I don't know. Is there do you get to use it X amount of times before you whistled for an illegal defense? Who knows? It's certainly interesting, and we'll see.
Yeah, I like the idea of limiting it to a certain number of times. That to me sounds more realistic than a ghost win in the playoffs.
Yeah, like support, and that brings another element of managerial strategy into it. Your bench coach, your smart analytics people upstairs. We have 3 at bats where we can use a shift. When do we deploy it? When do we use it? When do we use it early? We're going to use it late. Let's be smart about it. Maybe that brings an intriguing element that, the fan at home or in the seats can sort of manage along with the brain trust.
Yeah, lots to think about. And right now, all there is to do is think, because the lockout continues on. We're in the 4th month of it, and some progress was made, but not enough. That's where things stand. Thanks for listening to the Phillies Talk Podcast. We'll catch you early next week.